Welcome to the Living Medicine podcast, where we talk about ethical medical use of psychedelic psychotherapy, teaching skills, examining the issues, and interviewing interesting people. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Dr. Signe Goldman, your host for Living Medicine, where we interview clinical and medical professionals in the evolving ketamine and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy space. Recent interviews we've done are with Ron Siegel from Harvard on mindfulness and psychedelics, and Dick Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, on non-ordinary or potential spiritual content in psychedelic sessions. So please check those out. Today, we have part 2 of Sandy's recent interview with Michael and Annie Mithoefer. If you haven't heard the first half of that interview, please check that out in our prior episode. Enjoy.
Let's kind of talk about this piece about drug research versus psychotherapy outcome research. And I'm going to just pull out a couple pieces in particular, and then we can see where it goes. But what I got in my readings and my watching was one of the big things was the functional blinding piece. Like, that in drug research, that it is that, ideally, the patients, the participants, they don't know which they got. They don't know if they got the placebo or the medicine, and they can't tell. Mm-hmm. And in the MDMA study, you did these wonderful equivalent placebo groups, and they got exactly the same therapeutic process with exactly the same therapist, but within some point, they're going to know that they got the medicine. And there's no real way. Well, usually, that's interesting. Not everybody did.
Not everybody.
No. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to ponder. Mm-hmm. But that, and then that the review panel said that was a bad thing, which is a very classic, like, holding to the drug research methodology. But the thing is that in psychotherapy outcome research, if you're going to do either waitlist control, which is, what you do if you don't have equivalent placebo, equivalent control group. Mm-hmm. But even in then, if we're going to just like chat, and somebody else is getting CBT, and then we're just chatting, even if it's an hour at a time, people are pretty quickly going to know,
right? Yeah,
that they're not getting the therapy,
right?
And then related to that,
they're a participant in it, so they can't not know what's going on,
right?
Mm-hmm. That's the whole model of this. It's a participatory thing. It's a relationship in which the person is an actor and the primary actor in their own healing with support, not that they're just like irrelevant.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Right. So they're in the MDMA session, and so in psychotherapy outcome research, that's just an assumption that the participant is going to know. And then another assumption that's kind of related to it, and then I'll stop and turn it over to you, is expectancy effects. Mm-hmm. That if somebody enters a psychotherapy outcome research trial, they're going to have some hope that it's going to work, or they wouldn't do it.
Why would they sign up?
Why would they sign up? It's a thing, right? Like somebody's monitoring you, they're checking on you, you have to answer a million questions. Like people are, you're going through a whole big thing, there's video. You wouldn't do it if you didn't have some hope that it might work.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so, again, that's just endemic in psychotherapy outcome research, and yet this panel brought those forth as like huge methodological concerns. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah.
Well, when Prozac came along, everybody knew this is a exciting new drug being studied for depression.
Yeah.
And if they sign up for the trials, they're going to know that. And if they can't have an orgasm the next week, they're probably going to notice that too. So the blinding in many drug studies is a challenge. But, science is about figuring out how to discover what's actually going on and figuring out a method to discover that. Yeah. It's not about figuring out this is how we discover things, and so we're only going to look at anything that doesn't fit in this way of discovering things. We can't research.
Yeah.
That's basically what it would amount to. It would mean, you can't do any meaningful research with psychotherapy. because you can't. So it just doesn't make sense. It presents new challenges. There are many
Which we
things
went
that you
through.
can learn with a double-blind controlled trial, but there are other things you can't learn with a double-blind controlled trial, and that's what we're coming up against. And we had so many discussions with FDA about this, trying to solve it. First, we tried to do a dose response.
Well, the first study was just a placebo, inactive placebo.
Right.
Like you just be hanging out, chatting.
Yeah. You would,
Well, no,
but
I
you'd be
mean,
doing therapy,
we do
but
the
they
same
would
therapy.
not get anything.
But the placebo was not, because we
Was
did some
inactive.
studies
The
with low
placebo
dose.
was inactive in the first phase 2 study.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've done,
And then the second one was the
phase
dose
2 was
response.
largely, Rick Doblin's thesis at Harvard was about how to do this, was about thinking you'd solve the blinding problem with dose escalation.
So starting with a
Starting
lower
with low
dose.
dose, progressively higher doses, you find out, the more of the medicine you take, the better they do.
Right.
That shows, even if they're unblinded in all cases. The trouble is that didn't work for two reasons. I mean, we'd studied 0, 25, 30, 40, 50, 75, 100, 150, 125. So what we found was it didn't work for two reasons. There's a threshold effect. If when you get to a certain dose, it becomes useful, it becomes helpful, and you can tell people are having an MDMA experience.
Right.
Below that dose, it's not useful, and you can tell that they're not having an MDMA experience most of the time. There are some notable exceptions.
Right.
And then, so that was one factor. And the other factor was we used low doses of MDMA because they're documented confounds with other things, Ritalin, niacin. People have talked about all those. They've all got confounds, and they don't work that well for blinding.
Yeah.
The low dose MDMA improved the blinding somewhat, but it made people more anxious, and they did worse.
They dropped out.
We had to
Oh, interesting.
Two
Yeah.
people dropped out.
we had to change in the study with veterans where we did 3 different doses, 30, 75, and 125. We had to amend the protocol partway through because that people had to go through 3 of whatever they were randomized to. So it was months and 3 MDMA sessions, and we found after 2 people had the 30 milligrams, it was just too difficult.
Oh,
One of
interesting.
them dropped out, and then so we changed it to only 2 sessions with the first dose, which was okay scientifically because where our outcome measure was. But we saw at the end of that study, same 2 therapists, with the low dose MDMA, we had people improved with therapy plus low dose, but they only improved half as much as they did with therapy plus inactive placebo.
Oh, interesting.
So they told us it made them more anxious. They complained, they dropped out, and we saw the people who didn't drop out, it interfered with the therapy. So when we had the discussions with FDA, we discussed that. We could use low-dose MDMA, but it would advantage our product.
Well, so in that is drug research methodology. Right? Like you're
Exactly.
looking at different dose and, tracking the patients and adjusting the protocol accordingly, keeping above and beyond all else, do no harm.
Yeah.
And the fact that you start to seeing these adverse effects and stop immediately, like to me that, once again, that's following the most strict of drug protocols, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we concluded with FDA, this was an in-person meeting where we hashed this out among others. We decided there is no solution beyond very well blinding the raters.
Yeah.
Not the adherence raters, but the outcome raters.
So the people doing the CAPS, PTSD scores were all very well trained, remote. All is done remotely, and they never saw the same participant twice. So the raters didn't know where
So the
they
raters were not the therapists. The raters were,
They were not
working
even,
with the
they were
participants,
thousands,
and they
hundreds
knew
or
nothing.
thousands of miles away.
Right. Okay.
And they did not know the whole protocol. We kept parts of it hidden.
And they didn't know where the people were in the
They
protocol.
didn't know if it was-
Except that if the first session.
Yeah, they had to know if it was a baseline CAPS, but after that, they had no idea how many sessions they'd had or what they'd had. People were instructed and reminded 3 times during the outcome ratings, don't say anything that would reveal to your rater whether you've had a session, what it was like. Don't say anything about that. Just talk about the symptoms that the rater wants you to. So,
and that seems to really speak to another one of the critiques, which is, that the therapists and the research team was so incredibly biased that they were overlooking adverse effects. And I mean, that is a really significant effort to keep these raters blinded. They don't know anything about it.
Right.
I mean, right? I don't know what else.
Well, you couldn't do something. Yeah, right.
and the FDA couldn't figure out anything else for us to do. We couldn't figure
So
out
you did
anything
what
else.
they said, and we did.
And we had a special protocol session, which is an extra step. We spent months hashing out all these details, and we have a written agreement that this protocol design is adequate for approval if we get statistically significant results and no new safety problems. So that wasn't really on the table for FDA.
Yeah.
The AdCom was not apparently aware of how much time we spent working this out as best we could with FDA.
I think that's one frustration.
Sure, I bet.
Is
I mean,
that
you're like, wait a minute, we did
how
do
much
that.
how much we did to work out some of these things that the committee didn't seem to be aware of.
Well, and I think one of the things to me that has always struck me, and I remember hearing it was like an NPR interview. It was probably after the stage 1 or maybe stage 2. It was a long time ago, where it was this panel of researchers who were dissecting the data, and one of them was for it, and the other 3 were like, we honestly came to this panel expecting, we really want to hate this. We do not want to give people drugs to feel better. And because we are methodologists, we cannot. This methodology is so rock solid that we really can't poke holes in it. And I would imagine that you designed it knowing that it was going to be under the most incredible scrutiny ever.
We did. We did.
So you're not going to leave a rock unturned.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, Rick Doblin, we've all known that, but Rick has specifically said often, we got to do this better than anybody else.
Yeah.
We got to be more rigorous.
Right, exactly.
And we also got to look for the harms too. He bought primates for George Riccardi to do the toxicity studies with MDMA when George Riccardi was hell-bent on proving MDMA was dangerous.
Yeah.
And Rick he funded some of that.
Yeah.
MAPS funded some of those Riccardi safety studies. So he knew we got to be extra squeaky clean, and we've got to look at all the risks as carefully as we can. And that's what, we've been doing for 25 years, and Rick was doing it before that.
Right.
With funding those other studies. So
Yeah.
Safety concerns have really been addressed at every step, because you would know, the FDA
Well, there are
is looking
some
at it, they're educating you about it, you're going to be doing everything, because that's obviously going to be a big criticism.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there were some criticisms about the labs that weren't done, and the positive adverse events that was misunderstood, I think, by some of the sites in phase 3. But those seem like things that can be addressed.
Sure.
Maybe in later studies.
Right. Or just tracking it really, really, really carefully in a highly controlled rollout.
Right.
Because the concern there, right, is that people have so many positive effects that it opens up addiction potential.
Right.
Right. That's what what they're saying is we underreported the positive effects because we didn't call them adverse events, which, we discussed.
Silly us.
We discussed it in detail, and obviously it was a mistake not to record it differently now in retrospect.
Right.
But we discussed this about.
Well, we did record those in one of the phase 2 studies, I think. We did record some of the positive things.
But not as adverse events.
Not as adverse events.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
expected features, and we'd take note. We had a checklist actually in the beginning about if they were feeling positive mood too, but we did not report them as adverse events because we didn't think of them as adverse events.
Well, and it's super interesting because I'm developing a theory, and that's a total separate conversation about what psychedelics really, one of the big change agents may very well be positive affect tolerance, increasing people's capacity to feel safe,
to feel good,
feeling good.
Yes.
And so I suspect that is a direction the field is going to go in, and Rick Hansen growing the good, that's
and sometimes it takes.
So it's not really an adverse effect it's an expected.
It's something you're hoping for.
Right. So,
It's another mismatch in
Right.
why this is confusing people now, because we use the SUDS, the subjective universal distress scale, every 90 minutes during the session. We did that because the IRB required us to do it, because they were afraid people are going to be getting upset during the sessions.
yeah.
Ironically, so we said, okay, fine, we'll track it.
Yeah.
Ironically, if people had never gotten upset, we would have thought that, the IRB was
therapy wasn't
concerned
working.
it'll be bad if they get upset. The reality was, in this model, if they never got upset and they never dealt with anything difficult, it probably would be a problem.
Well, I mean, right. Like, if you're going to do, I mean, I'm a trauma therapist. Like, some people get worse before they get better.
Usually.
You have to learn to experience. You have to learn to, like, be in the present moment, to be able to be in your body, to be able to feel your emotions, to be able to go through either events or just be in relationship with others. Like, that's what recovery is.
Right.
Yes.
And there isn't a world in which you can't have some upset during
Any
that
trauma
time.
therapist can tell you that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to just mention one other piece, and then we'll move into the therapeutic model, because there was another piece too about like expectancy effects and selection bias. And again, I just want to just note, like, that is again endemic in psychotherapy outcome research.
Yeah. Can I say something more about the positive thing?
Yeah, please.
Because I think they do have a point. Even though we didn't report it that way,
Yeah.
I get what they're saying in a way, because we had that one very egregious situation with the phase 2 study in Canada.
For those who
in
don't know,
Vancouver.
that was where there was sexual abuse of,
Yeah.
of a participant.
Right. Not during the MDMA session, but while the person was still enrolled in the study. It was terrible. The therapist and his wife was the co-therapist. That was terrible, and it happened once. So I don't want to make light of that at all. And the fear that I understand is that people start feeling really good, and then they're more vulnerable to being manipulated by the therapist.
Right.
And I think the other thing that can happen is the therapist can get ego inflation, because this amazing healing is happening in front of them. The therapist is, the participant is projecting it onto the therapist as such a great therapist.
Yeah.
And the therapist can take that on, and suddenly they're going down the wrong path. So it's a serious problem, and we need to we obviously need to be careful of that, and that would be the reason for looking more rigorously into the positive emotions and whether, where are the risks of that.
Oh, great.
So
I love that.
I
That's
just
a
want
great
to say
point.
that's fair enough. We don't
Totally,
object
sure.
to that.
Well, and to me, when you say it that way, especially, it seems like a solvable problem. Like,
is.
train, educate, train, and track. Really, really carefully. And, we have ethics boards and we have review boards, and this stuff happens. Therapists have sex with patients. It's like the most common thing brought up in front of the ethics boards. We don't want that.
Definitely not, but it happens.
Obviously, but it does happen. And it's unfortunate that it happened in this one occasion. And it's useful, as you say, to look at it. And it's a solvable problem.
Yeah. And we hear that some other people have said they've been harmed. The public commentators said that. The company has made, I don't work for the company, but I'm a consultant, but they've made a lot of efforts to make it easier to report, because we want to know. Everybody wants to know if somebody's had a problem.
Sure.
So there's a hotline and all that. We haven't been able to find out any details about the other people, except we know that some people have said the harm was they had such a deep experience with these therapists in such a short period of time, and then it was over. So I get that too.
That makes
There are
so
real
much
ethical
sense.
questions about how long should we keep doing blinded controlled trials with these medicines. Once we've got enough data to reassure us enough, we need to figure out another way to study it in more depth.
Right.
Like adaptive real world trials or something, there are many
Or
other.
when a patient can continue with the therapist.
Right, yeah.
And that would be a real world application. Like, as a real world therapist, I'm not going to be
You're
like,
not going to say
and
tomorrow.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
right.
No, and how we get that paid for is, continues to be a question, but I just wouldn't do that.
So ironically, these are artifacts of the research design more than there are problems with MDMA.
Right.
Some of these things.
So we got about 10 minutes max. So just to kind of move into, the development of the therapeutic model. Another one of the, kind of criticisms has been like, this isn't really therapy. Like, and it is. I mean, it really, like, as a trauma therapist, like, I can see the different elements of that. And obviously a great deal of intention was put into that. And the study design is that you've got independent raters actually checking that you're doing particular things that are elements of the model.
Adherence raters.
Adherence raters.
Yeah.
And again, that is what, manualized treatment looks like in a flexible protocol, which is real world application.
Yeah, one person on the advisory committee said, well, I don't know, the therapy apparently is just the therapist doing whatever they want. That doesn't really fit with the fact that we have all these highly trained adherence raters who have to show that they have interrelated reliability very frequently, and they're able to rate, according to the manual, whether people are following or not. It's not just a random activity.
Right. So that would mean that you have to be able to know you're seeing a particular intervention.
You have adherence measures for each type of session, for the prep, for the MDMA, and for the integration session.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at the videos and then giving that information to the supervisors who are supervising that therapist.
Yeah.
With that participant.
Yeah, so all the therapists had not only the adherence raters, but supervision from us or other more experienced people based on watching the videos of the sessions. We saw what they were doing and we gave them feedback. So it was a very rigorous process.
Yeah.
And the way it developed is we never discussed with anybody how we were going to actually do the therapy.
You might want to take that out.
Well, so there is that.
No, in terms
but that's what comes from being an experienced trauma therapist, though, right?
There was no one else involved that knew anything about therapy.
Well, you're also not going to do CBT for 8 hours. Like, it's like giving you, that context of a long session is a piece of that as well.
But, we had the model that we learned from Stan, and we kind of combined it with our own experience
working with
trauma, and later we had internal family systems training and stuff. But we started out, we just did it, and I had written an appendix describing the approach about the inner healing intelligence. It was not very long, and it had one reference, Stanislav Grof, LSD psychotherapy page, whatever, where he talks about the inner healing intelligence. That was it. So we did the first study, and it worked. So we realized we got to replicate this, see if we can replicate it, and see if others can replicate it. Therefore, we'll need a manual. And at first we said, we don't really like manuals, and this is very flexible and intuitive. How can you have a manual? But then we kept coming back to the reality that we had to have a manual. And then we realized, actually, you can have a manual with flexibility.
Right.
And so we thought, well, let's try to write a manual. And so what we did was, Rick hired June May Roos, a psychologist who's a friend now, to watch. Well, we had audio and then some video of our sessions for the first study. She watched them all and took notes. So her goal was to see if we were doing what we said we were doing, and to give examples if we were, and then discuss it if we weren't. So she did that, and then we spent 2 different week-long periods, one at our house, one at her house, with her, like marathons, 12 hours a day, watching the video or listening and talking about it, and refining the manual to describe what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And because what we realized is, there's a lot of flexibility, but it's not random, and we can describe the important principles of what we do.
Right. And I mean, again, in my training, back in the 50s or whenever people first started to try to research psychotherapy, it was the same thing, like, we can't manualize it. We can't manualize the magic.
Right.
People think that they're doing something unique, but you have to. And out of that comes theoretical development, and out of that comes efficacy and being able to look at different elements of the treatment. And, that's where that can all go.
I wish we met you 25 years ago. You know a lot about psychotherapy research.
I contacted you. I mean, I really did. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I mean, there's a lot that we could go into in that.
Yeah.
So certainly what I'm hearing is there was a great deal of intention put to the model, that you took what you'd been doing, but you'd already been doing trauma work for a really long time and had been doing it effectively, that you had already blended non-ordinary states of consciousness with trauma work, so that informed what you were doing, and then you went back and then you manualized it. You looked at
And
other
then
things
made an
that were
adherence
emerging.
manual.
Right.
Yeah.
And you studied other emerging things, IFS,
Like
somatic
IFS,
experiencing, and things like that. Hakomi, and all of those different things that are informing it.
Yeah,
There's
I'm
certainly
going
a
to just say
psychodynamic framework.
how powerful, what a powerful addition learning about IFS has been.
Yeah.
From, Dick Schwartz has developed such a powerful model of that, and it is a really good synergy.
Totally. Well, and so, paying attention over the years to what's emerging and then adding in what you think, working. I mean, that is the scientific method.
Right.
And so I just, once again, just really, really honor that, what I see as just like an incredible attention to psychotherapy outcome research methodology. I don't know anything about drug research methodology, but I know something about the scientific method.
Yeah.
And so, I see that at being every step of the way. So,
Well, thanks. I'd like to say one more thing about the therapy. Is before Annie shuts me up.
No, I'm not going to shut you up. Of course you have one more thing.
We're not saying the way we describe this in the manual is what everyone should always do from now on at all. We're not asking that people only use this method with MDMA if it's approved.
right.
We know people are going to innovate, and there probably are better ways, and there certainly are different ways.
Yeah.
What we're saying is these are some foundational principles that others have learned before us, and we've learned, many people have learned about using this kind of medicine or this kind of approach to shifting consciousness. People have learned some very important things about that over many years. Stan Grof has told us when he first gave people LSD in Prague, he had his white coat on, his stethoscope, and the clock, and they were sitting at a desk. They didn't know. He was a Freudian and biological psychiatrist.
Right.
He paid attention to what was happening and adjusted accordingly. So would we want to throw out all of that, these very intelligent, highly trained scientists and psychiatrists and psychologists, the things they've learned over decades about important principles of working with this kind of state? No, we don't want to throw that out. We've learned a lot from them. We've added some to it. We want people to have a grounding in this foundational understanding of the potential of these medicines and the potential for something unexpected to happen.
Well, and the fact that, it's 40% improvement in the placebo group, correct? So the therapy itself is having a clinically significant effect on the placebo group.
Absolutely. Among people who, in most of the studies, most of the people had lots of treatment with therapy and medications and had PTSD for years. And as you said, there's something about an 8-hour session.
Yeah.
I think that was a big part of it.
Time, too.
People would really, and something about
The relationships.
respecting the inner healing intelligence in the relationship. But
Yeah. So what else would you like to share? Right, we've covered research methodology, we've covered your origin stories, we've covered some of the journey here, we've covered some of the methodology pieces, we've got the final approval meeting. I don't know what, if it's the final or what that is, but there's another meeting coming up with the FDA in August.
Well, that's their deadline.
Okay, well, one thing I would like to say is that, if we do get approval, we also want to be careful.
Yeah.
We've always been really worried about the importance of training and making sure people get trained to do this, and then supervision or consultation and mentoring. I mean, I didn't know how to work with this when I first did it. I knew something about being with people in non-ordinary states, but each participant is different. And so in having an ongoing relationship with your mentor supervisor for, unexpected things, I think that's got to be part of it.
Right.
And, the people that say you don't need much therapy, like with psilocybin, and, I don't want it to go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's such an important piece. Is like, I agree, like that we need absolute careful attention. As a person who does training and who also does psychedelic therapy with ketamine, I'm better than I used to be at working with ketamine after 20 some years of having done psychotherapy. Like, I've learned a lot. There is a lot.
Well, that's just like any doctor, any nurse, anybody.
Yeah.
You learn from experience.
Yeah.
And we've learned over the years, we've done lots of trainings with several thousand therapists, and we've noticed that it's much easier to train an experienced trauma therapist how to work with MDMA than to train someone who's familiar with non-ordinary states but doesn't have much experience with trauma. So it just points to it's how important the therapy is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not different from supporting people with trauma the way every experienced trauma therapist already has experience in without MDMA. It's not that different from that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that. So the emphasis on being careful, like I heard, embedded in the discussion, like that there were some important points about like tracking the positive effects and what are we concerned about. And, that there were some points raised and that you'd like to see some follow up on that. I love that.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe there can be some good coming of that we can know how to be even more careful.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, we don't want to blow off the concerns at all.
Yeah.
And,
And it's exciting. It would be, really wonderful for people, for the patients out there.
Well, and I'm hearing on social media, like, veterans, there's an outcry, like, don't keep this from us.
Well, they've already taken it into their own hands.
Yeah. Right. And that's the danger.
And,
So, as luminaries in the field, as some of the most influential people, like within this whole domain, and we're taking into account the need for training and supervision and, careful rollout and tracking it really carefully. What advice would you have for me as a person who actually co-runs a training program and would like to be involved in this, and really for others like who are involved in that training and supervision effort? Like, what kind of advice do you have for people like me or others?
we need you. That's not advice, but I think well, you're already doing it. You're doing ketamine trainings, and if MDMA is approved, you'll be capable of doing MDMA training. So I think for those people who, in your position, who have a lot of experience, my advice would be figure out how to develop a local or regional center where people can not only get training, they can get ongoing supervision, mentorship, community, and an ongoing relationship with the center. I think that's the best way to ensure safety. If there's a community of therapists and their mentors, if somebody starts to go off the rails, there's a more chance someone can help them with their problem before it becomes a disaster. So,
and maybe part of that community too would be having a program where people who couldn't afford, who don't have insurance, because we don't know what's going to happen with the cost,
The access.
we don't know about the insurance. We know that there's a code, but having some kind of a patient access.
Right, some kind of fund that increases a wider range of access.
that's a whole huge problem.
But people need like a community after they have these experiences.
Oh, for sure.
So that they, have people they can talk to.
Sure, integration circles, and therapists too. Like, I mean, it's a thing.
Right.
When you're like working with non-ordinary states, even when you're not on the medicine, like you're in a non-ordinary state. If you're meeting with the client and you're attuned, that in and of itself is its own thing.
So.
And there is the risk that people get too attached to the medicine and don't understand what you're saying is often more happens during the integration period than during the MDMA session. It's just so important that's one of the messages that I'm advising you to carry forward.
Yeah.
Is making sure people don't forget how much is not happening in the MDMA session itself, but is happening as it continues to unfold.
And the center could offer ways to integrate meditation, breath work.
Different types of non-ordinary states.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that with ketamine. It's like people are just like, oh, give me that medicine. I'm like, no. Like, preparation, medicine, integration, that's the process. We can't shortchange any of those.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And I think, can I say one other thing?
Yeah, please.
I mean, this might sound grandiose and ridiculous, but I think we all know that the mental health system, psychiatry and psychology needs radical change.
Yeah.
We got a pretty pathetic situation going on with how we're doing with treating people that are suffering with mental health.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been getting better very fast at all. In fact, the numbers are getting worse.
Right.
So a big change is needed. This is not just another drug. This is a totally different approach to healing, not that we've come up with, but that we're bringing forward.
Right.
That's where the real lesson is.
Yeah.
We need to shift the whole system toward serving and supporting people's inner healing capacity, rather than just handing out drugs to them or telling them what they need. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge lift. So I think, in a way, we're at a point, approval's going to come sometime, whether it's August or not, we don't know. We hope so.
Right.
It'll come for psilocybin soon too, I'm pretty sure, and others to follow. But the crossroads is going to be how the system likes to not change and likes to suck everything into the way it's already operating.
Yeah.
And there's, you can already see it.
Right.
People wanting to kind of minimize the therapy or get rid of the psychedelic effects. Or
How can
all
we
these
have 8
things.
hours
How
sessions?
can this fit into what
Right.
we're doing?
Yeah.
Well,
Two
what you're
therapists.
doing is not working very well, and this is different, so you're going to have to do it differently if you want to do it.
Right.
And so I think we're at a battle for Middle Earth, is how I think of
That's what
it.
it feels like to me.
Which way is it going to go? How much? And I'm sure it's going to be mixed. But to me, that's where I hope you, next generation, can make sure that this changes the system rather than that the system distorts
Takes it over.
the potential of these medicines.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting because it's like there's like symptom reduction, and then this is like enhanced consciousness, the ability to deepen into meaningful relationship, the capacity to experience joy and well-being, of which symptom reduction becomes a part of it. But when we begin to look at growing the good and enhanced quality of life, and that is a multimodal, multi-factor piece, whereas this is just one piece.
Right.
You know, like I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a systemic change.
Yeah, and some people don't want that. Some people would rather just have a pill, but many people would be willing to go through the effort and the pain that it can take to take this other route to really develop. So people should have the right to choose between those two approaches.
Right. Any last thoughts, future directions, things you'd like to see?
No.
Great.
This has been great, Sandy.
You all are just such a joy.
Thanks for doing
Thank you
it. Take
so
your time.
much.
Well, thanks for your thoughtful
Yeah. Well,
questions and ideas.
I mean, I'm just deeply humbled, deeply honored, and so grateful of all that you all have done for the field, and that's brought us to this moment, and the way that's impacted my life personally and professionally. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That touches me.
Thanks for joining us at Living Medicine. Be sure to check out our upcoming episode with Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, where he talks about unusual experiences encountered in the altered state. See you soon. Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.